and welcome to another episode of CXCY, brought to you by our friends at ClueTrack. My name is Dan Gingiss. I am the experience maker, and I will be your host and guide through yet another industry that we're going to look at this episode. I am so excited because we are looking at an industry today that is very, very interesting and unique, depending on where you live. It can be a monopoly, or you may have competitive choices. But it is definitely an area that almost everybody has to interact with at some point. I am talking about your electric utility company. Woohoo! Electric utilities. Here we go. I'm excited because this is such a fascinating industry. And as always, we have a wonderful guest joining us to shed some light on this industry. I am so excited today because we have another very special guest. We have a utility industry expert. Her name is Veronica Dasher. Veronica, welcome to CXCY.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I am so excited to get to know you and to leverage your expertise, but why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Veronica Dasher. I've worked in the utility industry for the past decade. Prior to that, I was in the telecom industry where I specialized in customer service, and I've also worked in consumer experience for manufacturers as well. So, the utility industry and consumer experience are near and dear to my heart.
That is awesome. Those are the kind of people we like to talk to on this show. So we're going to have some fun, and we really appreciate you being here. So as I mentioned, we are going to talk about the electric utilities industry. And as usual, we have used ClueTrack's data and analysis capabilities to look at over 15,000 customer reviews online that cover 25 top electric companies in the US. What I love about ClueTrack is that we're able to look at this data in such a simple way and grab takeaways from it. And I want to remind you that the takeaways that we find are going to be applicable to all industries. So if you don't work in the electric industry, that's okay. You have absolutely something to learn from this episode. These are the companies that we looked at. And again, everything is anonymized, so we're not going to talk about specific companies here on the show. But just so you know, we looked at 25 top electric utility companies in the United States to collect all of this data. All right, we are going to start with a quiz, Veronica. Now, I might not have told you that there was a quiz, but don't worry, I think that you're going to do just fine on the quiz.
Oh, pop quizzes.
The question for you today is, of the following 4 items that are arranged in alphabetical order, what are the 2 things that cause the most positive customer reviews? So your choices are the app experience, bill payment methods, energy consumption reports, or power outage information. What do you think are the delighters, the things that cause positive reviews?
Oh, this is a really good one. So I am going to go with energy consumption report and app experience.
Okay, wonderful choices. Now, we always make sure here on CXCY that there are no wrong answers, but I love your choices. Those are actually the ones that I would have gone for as well. So let's see what the answer is. You got it, 100%. I told you there were no wrong answers here. This is wonderful. App experience and energy usage report. Great job. All right, let's dive into these details because we're going to learn something. And this is, of course, my favorite part. So when we looked at apps, what we found was that people were talking about apps being simple and straightforward. That makes sense because we want this to be simple. This doesn't have to be a complicated engagement, right? There are certain things that we want to be able to do on the app, and then by and large, we want to go about the rest of our day. So people used words like easy to use or that the information was easily accessible. And at the right, we have some specific pieces of feedback. These are in customer words, using things like user-friendly, very convenient. Keep up the good work. I am very happy. Veronica, do you hear these things coming from customers very often?
We do hear it sometimes. And, one of the reasons why I made the selection that I made is because about 46 to 49% of our population today is Gen Z and millennials. Now, something that's interesting about Gen Z is they have not grown up in a world without technology. So for them, it's quite it's normal to get on an app and to be able to see all of the information that you need and to be able to look and see what's personalized to you. And if a company is doing that really well, particularly a utility company, then yes, they will get accolades. And, these generations are more environmentally friendly. They are looking for companies that have sustainability goals. So those energy usage reports are very important to them because they want to know how they're doing compared to their neighbors. They want to know how much they're using and how they can find ways to reduce that usage.
I love that. That's such a great insight that this is a generational thing, and you're absolutely right. I have teenagers who they don't quite have their own utility bills yet, but I'm sure that when they get there, they are going to expect to interact with the utility company on an app. And so that makes all the sense in the world. And, it reminds me a little bit. I worked in the credit card industry. And one of the things that I always told my team was no one wakes up in the morning wanting to go to their credit card website. So our job is to help them get on their way as fast as possible. I would imagine that's probably true about the utilities industry as well. And I don't mean any offense by that. It's just, it's one of those things we sort of have to do versus want to do. Is that right?
Absolutely. With the utility industry, I mean, when I first started with the company, what I knew, or when I first started in the industry, what I knew was turning on my lights and making sure that they worked and when the power was out. And when the power is out, it's a negative experience for people, but power is literally what powers our lives. Everything that we're doing right now, the lights that are on in this room, the laptop, what's powering it right now, it's so important to us. So I think that people don't really want to interact with their utility company. It's one of those things that they just expect to work. And if it doesn't work, at the very least, they want to be able to interact with you. They want to be able to understand what's happening. Most people are willing to work with you as long as you're communicating.
Totally fair, totally fair. And you already touched on this, but let's get to to some of the specifics that customers like being in charge of their energy usage and in being able to track it. And so you see that the companies that got really high marks, it was for things like keeping track of daily usage, how does it break down, being able to save energy and having maybe tips for that, tracking your bill, et cetera. And again, on the right, we have specific comments from customers in their online reviews. I'm able to track my electric usage. It helps me with understanding my bill. It's easy to use and navigate, gives real-time updates and current status and outages. So I think you absolutely hit it on the head, Veronica, that this is really, really important to customers. And I love the fact that you also brought up the sort of the climate element of it, the doing good part that we all want to. It's about saving money for sure. We want to, this is why I'm always telling the kids to turn off the lights when they're not in a room. But that there is also this desire to sort of track the energy usage and frankly, maybe our own contributions.
Absolutely. Data analytics is a huge part of our world today. And climate change is such a big topic for us. People are finding more and more ways to become sustainable. And, there are many people, and I'm not saying that it's just Gen Z and millennials, but there's a keen focus within that group. About 75% of millennials are looking at brands that are more sustainable, and Gen Z is coming right behind them. And then you have those who are more environmentally conscious in other age brackets as well. So being able to track that energy usage is important to them because they all want to do their part in combating climate change and finding different alternatives in order to help reduce their carbon footprint.
All right, Veronica, I promise this is the last quiz of the show. We're now going to look at the top two concerns of customers. So these are the things that are causing people to leave negative reviews about their electric utility company. Again, we've put them in alphabetical order. We have bill payment, customer service, fees and charges, or power outage. Where does your head go on these to the two biggest concerns?
Wow, this is a really good one. I'm going
You can
to
pick any of
go.
them, right? Like they
I,
all fit pretty well.
They really do. This is tougher than the first one. Well, people are typically really upset if they have frequent power outages. So we'll go with that. And then I'll also go with customer service because if anyone has a bad experience, typically they're going to tell you about it and they're more likely to leave a negative review. So I'm going to choose those. Final answer.
I love it. Oh, do I get to be Regis Philbin now? This is fantastic.
Yes, you do.
I love those answers, and I think the customer service one in particular is really important because as somebody way smarter than I once said, customer service is what happens when the customer experience breaks. Because if the customer experience was perfect, no one would ever have to call us. And so what we do next at that moment becomes so critical to the experience. So love your choices. I am not sure if they are totally correct. Let's find out. The top two concerns of customers based on 15,000 online reviews were bill payment and fees and charges. So very interesting, the other two. But of course, if you think about it, it all comes down to the Benjamins, right? It's all about the Benjamins. And so when we talk about money, that is going to be something that people are really going to be concerned with. And so what they talked about was bill payment and being able to make timely payments in order to avoid disconnections. And then customers want to understand how to reduce cost and avoid additional fees and charges. So if we dig a little bit deeper into this, on the bill payment side, we have people talking about delays in processing, not acknowledging that I have paid, that the payment options aren't easy, or that there is somehow inconsistent billing. And my guess there might be that our electric bill goes up and down every month, whereas other bills like our cable bill are the same every month. Over on the fees and charges side, we have people using words like transparency and fairness, necessity, or unexpected charges. And so these are definitely things that are sticking out to people. So I'm wondering if you can just talk to us a little bit, Veronica, from your experience about let's talk about the money part of it and how this affects the experience for people.
Sure. So I think in order to do that, we probably have to take a step back and look at the industry as a whole and what customers are being charged for. Speaking from a regulatory standpoint, whenever deregulation occurred in many states and at the federal level, what that did was it separated out generation from transmission and distribution to customers. So what we have on a lot of bills are the supply charges, which is for the commodity itself. And then you have the delivery charges. Those are the cost to actually deliver the service or the electricity to customers. In the industry, we refer to that as pipes and wires. And what a lot of people don't realize is that many of your standard electric utility companies do not generate electricity. And I can speak for New York especially, generators who provide the supply, the electricity commodity itself, are who help to set those prices. The utility company does not make money on supply. However, supply prices are way more variable than delivery charges, and for a number of reasons. When we look at economy or economics, you look at supply and demand. If there is less of a supply and you have a higher demand, typically the cost goes up. And so in recent years, we've seen things like the war on Ukraine affect natural gas prices, and that affects the commodity of natural gas itself, as well as natural gas as a generation source. And many people don't recognize or realize that natural gas is used to generate electricity. So as the supply or the cost to provide electricity increases, customers will see that on their bill. The delivery charges are pretty static. Utility companies typically litigate their rates through what's called a rate case with whatever their regulatory body is in their state, speaking about the United States. And, we have to get permission from our regulators. It has to be approved. The costs and the prices have to be approved by our regulators. So those costs typically don't fluctuate as much as people think. Where I think there's some opportunity is for us to explain and educate more about how the industry works. Typically, as I said before, people just expect their power to work, but consumers are becoming more and more conscious, and they want to know and understand what's on their bill. The other thing is that a lot of times there are charges on the bill that may not be associated with the utility company, but people don't recognize that. So there could be taxes and fees that are going to a state's general fund or going elsewhere, but we're required to collect those charges. And again, I think it comes down to just good old-fashioned education and outreach, which is something that the industry, I think, is working on in order to reach consumers more and inform them about our industry.
Well, I have to tell you, I just learned a lot right there. And so I really appreciate you explaining, especially that difference between the natural gas itself and the delivery of it. I do think that is confusing for people. I know I get in the mail all the time, different companies that I believe are delivery companies that are competing for my business, and it's a little bit confusing. So that was super helpful. And I think,
I'll stop you right there. It's usually the supply companies that are trying to sell you. The delivery company is usually utility, but through deregulation, one of the pillars was let's make selling the supply, the commodity itself, competitive. And so that's when you have a lot of energy supply companies that are trying to say, hey, we can procure this, we can procure electricity from the wholesale market for you, and we can get it to you. And usually the draw for energy supply companies is that they're able to provide a fixed rate, whereas utility companies have a more variable rate because it's a pass-through for them. They're not making a profit on the supply, and they're getting it on the wholesale market and delivering it to customers at cost.
Okay, so this is fascinating because obviously I had it wrong as well. And so, it sort of reminds me, if I could make a parallel, it sort of reminds me of the healthcare industry and how complex the healthcare industry is. You have, God forbid, a hospital visit, and you get 17 different bills, right, from different doctors and different in the hospital and the different entities. And it's so hard to track everything. And of course, the burden falls on the patient. And I think here it feels like the burden is falling, first of all, on the electric company, because you're asked to put all of the charges in one place, even if they're not your charges. And then the burden is also falling on the consumer to understand what the heck is going on, because as you pointed out, all the consumer really wants is for their power to be on. That's really all we need. That's the only thing that we care about. And yet it has become really complex. I just want to show you a couple things that we found that I think talk to this, is that and I think this is why bill payments and fees and charges rise to the top, because simply people don't understand it. And so we see that the bill payment section creates a lot of negativity, and a lot of it is because billing is difficult to understand. Again, that's a quote from an actual online review. It's not user-friendly. It's very frustrating. When we get into fees and charges, people don't know why the fees are going up or down, or why they're, in particular up, right? Nobody's going to complain when it goes down. And so they're not understanding all of this. So I love what you said about education. I guess the question that I ask, and I don't expect you to have all the answers here, because sure enough, the healthcare industry hasn't figured this out either. But how do we educate people in a simple way on a topic that they may or may not even care to be educated on?
I think it really comes down to engagement. And that is going to be the future, a frontier for businesses, particularly big companies. We have to understand our consumers. We have to understand what their wants and their needs are. We have to speak their language and understand where they are coming from so that we can appropriately tailor our messages. And I think the other part about engagement is that as we're talking to our customers, we're talking to our consumers, we may find areas where the system isn't working for either of us. So how do we come together on behalf of our customers, and how do our customers feel comfortable engaging with us to give us direct and candid feedback so that we can work together on solutions that will be a win-win for everyone?
Let's just push a little bit more on that. What can utility companies do to create more of a relationship with customers so that they can get this feedback? And I don't mean just, a satisfaction survey, but actually talking with customers to understand how they go through a bill, what is confusing to them and what is understandable to them, how we might explain it in different words. Talk to me a little bit about what utilities companies either are doing or should be doing to get at that more granular feedback from customers.
Some of the work, that's an excellent question, Dan. And some of the work that I have been directly involved in is creating opportunities for grassroots community engagement. Customers may have, a number of different issues, or they may have several thoughts about the industry. However, if you can bring your outreach directly to where customers are, speak with them, engage with them, ask them questions, you're able to do a few things. One, you start to pick up on some common trends. What is it that they're talking about? What is it that they're asking? And then how can we bring that back into our organizations and act on that, right? You're also gaining trust. If they see their utility provider out in the community, talking to them, actually listening and providing them with information, you have a better feeling about that company, right? And you have an even better feeling about that company if you start to see changes that reflect some of the feedback that you've given them. So as I said, I think engagement is going to be the frontier for companies in general. I've talked about, the different age ranges and what we see coming up. And there's an expectation that brands are going to engage, that they're going to evolve, that they're going to be responsive to their consumers' needs, or those brands will be in trouble.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I always place the blame or the credit on social media for that, because when you and I were growing up, if we wanted to connect with a brand, how did we do it? Like, I wrote letters. But nobody does that anymore, right? So now we can go onto social media, we can immediately post something, and we can have a conversation with a brand. And that allowed consumers to have more of a relationship. And I think they wanted that relationship, which is why you see that demand today. One other thing that comes to mind for me is that when utility companies can be proactive, that's a great way to gain some of that trust. And I've written about one particular company on the East Coast of the U.S. that has a gentleman whose title is storm director, and he gets onto social media and he tells people, look, a storm is coming, you might lose power, but don't worry, we're on the case, we know what's going on, we'll have it restored as soon as possible. And what's amazing when they do that is that when the power goes out, people don't flood the call center because they already know that the company's on it, right? They've established this trust, because very rarely do companies want to come out and say, by the way, the service we provide to you might not be working in a few hours, right? Like, nobody wants to say that. But when you do, it immediately shows you as being very trustworthy. And I think that, to me, is always one of those fun examples of like, yeah, you know what? Now that I know that the power might go out, I can prepare, and I'm not going to freak out if it does, because I know that the company's already got it handled. All right. So appreciate your inputs. We're going to move to our takeaways. And again, what I love about the takeaways, we always try to find things from the data of this particular industry, but we try to find takeaways that are going to apply to any industry. So let's see what we came up with from the utilities industry. Number one, enhancing the bill payment experience. We know that that is a tough part of the experience for utilities, but let's face it, nobody likes paying bills. So no matter what industry we're talking about. So if we can make it easy, if we can even make it fun or interesting or entertaining in some way. I was at a restaurant in San Diego once, and when they came with the bill, it was attached to the tines of a fork, and there was a sign that said, "Fork it over." And it made me laugh when it was time to pay the bill, right? Which is an awesome experience. And you don't think that people are going to tend to smile or laugh when it's time to pay a bill, but it is possible. Second is exactly what we were just talking about, fostering consumer trust and transparency. I think this is so critical in industries that are confusing and complex. for customers. But no matter what industry you're in, if you don't have the trust of your customers, that means that they are going to be looking at your competition. And as soon as that competitor comes out with some promotional deal, your customer is going to leave. So we've got to have the trust. And then prioritizing user friendliness in system design and navigation. This is the part I was talking about where nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to go to their credit card website or their utilities website or to open their one of those apps. So the idea is we've got to make it easy for them, user friendly, and allow them to go about the rest of their day. Veronica, what do you think of these takeaways, and are we missing anything?
I think that these takeaways are perfect. They make sense, right? I would never have put enhanced bill payment experience at the top of the list. So this is a learning opportunity for me, but absolutely making sure that we're engaging with customers, fostering that trust and transparency. That's something that we discussed, and prioritizing user friendliness and system design and navigation. People want the apps, they want applications, they want them to work, they want it to be easy and intuitive. So yes, this all makes sense.
Fantastic. Anything that you think we're missing? Is there anything that you would say about your own industry? Because you mentioned at the outset that you have worked in multiple industries. Is there anything that you found in the utilities industry that you've thought to yourself, man, I wish I had this back when I was in a previous job. It could have been useful.
So many things. The industry is very interesting. It's complex. There's so many different moving parts to it. And originally, when I started there, I said earlier, I thought about turning on the lights and whether the power, I plug something in, the power on or is it off? And most times it's on. But there are lots of hardworking men and women out there who are working on those power lines day in and day out. The way that the generation and transmission works, and how there are people who work on every small detail of that system and understanding how it interacts with the larger world, right? There's never a dull moment in the industry. There's always something going on. There's always different moving parts. We become involved in things that people would never know we were involved in, everything from economic development to community engagement to advocacy on behalf of our customers. So the industry is vast. There are a lot of different opportunities. And as the country continues, as the United States continues to embark on its energy transition, those opportunities are just going to increase.
Fantastic. Veronica Dasher, utility industry expert. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I know I learned something. I'm sure that our viewers did as well. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much.
And we appreciate you, the viewer, for being here as well. Thank you so much for watching another episode of CXCY. Want to do us a favor? Like this video, share this video, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, because we are trying to dig into all sorts of different industries to bring you takeaways that you can apply directly to your job. I know that I learned a lot from the utility industry today, thanks in part to Veronica and also to Cluetrack's data. And I have some new ideas now that I can apply to my business, which I never thought were going to come from this industry. And that is the whole point of our show. So for my friends at Cluetrack, this is Dan Gingiss, host of CXCY. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.